So, moving right along with our eternal project here, the GT750, that never seems to get any closer to completion, but I keep throwing money at. Today we are finally doing the clutch. Now, I was initially going to use the clutch basket that came with the engine, because when I was tearing it down I didn't notice anything wrong with it. However, when I put it in the engine the other day, just to test fit it, see how it all went together, I noticed that about halfway around that it was rubbing on the engine cases. Well, as it turns out, it's because somebody in their infinite wisdom has welded it back together. Now, they did a decent job here. Their weld is pretty good. I have no issue with that in and of itself. But it's completely out of round, which makes it totally worthless to me. Enter this lovingly packaged eBay box. What is it, you ask? Let me show you, he says. I'm pretty sure you can probably put this together based on the title of this video. Not quite an AVE quality unboxing, but we do what we can. That's right, it's a complete clutch assembly. The entire thing. Now, originally, I was just going to buy a new basket. But these were selling, including shipping, exchange rate, etc., etc., for about $75 Canadian. This entire assembly cost me about $150. Yes, it's twice as much. But it means that I have everything that I need. And if it turns out my clutch discs are unusable, or my bolts is no good, or I find some other little lovely weld or something that I didn't notice the last time I went through it, I will have everything that I need. So based on the fact that everything else has been totally cobbled together and done wrong on this bike, I decided that this was probably the best course of action. So without further ado, let us continue. But of course, first this goes into the scrap bin. Next, so let's see what we have to work with here. Looks like the clutch push rod, I'm assuming. It's been so long since I've had this thing apart that I lose track of what all the bits and pieces were. They bolted it back together, so we'll have to grab a socket and pop these out. Alright. Let's see what goodies the old E of Bay had to offer. Other reason I grabbed the entire assembly was there was a good chance I felt with how ragged on my last one was that the clutch springs were probably worn out as well. And yes, you can shim them with washers. There's nothing wrong with doing that, despite what some may tell you. It's perfectly acceptable. Just increases the preload on the springs and makes up for the wear and the sag, so to speak. But I figured having two sets wouldn't hurt. Again, with the way that everything else on this project is gone. What the hell, right? Odds are you're going to need it. Oh. Springs. spacers. Huh. Not bad. Bearing feels okay. See, nothing wrong with that. A little bit of dirt on it, but a quick dip in the solvent tank will fix that. Basket. The item that we were after is not too bad. There are a couple deep grooves, as you can see for some reason here. Only looks like it was grooved in. Usually you see it all the way along, but weirdly there's just like one disc grabbed in a lot more than the rest in one spot. That's very strange. I've never seen that before. But the rest, other than just being a little bit of dirt and greasy, oily sediment and goo in here. Again, nothing a solvent tank won't take care of. You can see it in the bottom there. And this looks very serviceable. It's in much, much, much better shape. So yeah, I'll give that a quick dip. Hopefully that'll go in, no problem. What else we got here? Clutch plates. We'll measure these up in a little bit here and compare them with the ones I have. There's lots of material left on them. Don't see any issue there. So yeah. What I'm going to do first before I wash this basket in the parts washer is these grooves I talked about earlier here. What happens with them is they snag on the friction discs when you engage and disengage the clutch, and they cause a very heavy, notchy feeling clutch when you pull it in and out. Makes it harder to disengage and engage. So I'm just going to take a small file here and file along each edge here to make them all nice and smooth. That way the clutch will be nice and easy to disengage. So nothing special, just a file and a little bit of time. So having now filed until blue in the face and given it a wash, I've done what I could for these deep grooves on the clutch basket here. Don't know if you can see them or not. Maybe get a little more light on the subject perhaps. A little better. Alright, so you can see I've done what I could for the grooves here. They're still there. They're still somewhat deep, but you can't file forever. They're a lot better than they were. We'll see if it causes an issue. I don't think it will. But if it does, the clutch is not all that bad to get to in the scheme of things. So let's carry on. So interesting, something I didn't notice here right away. I have to do a little bit of looking into. It's the original clutch basket from this model, the 75, assuming it's the correct one. Had this center bearing spacer that fits into the center of the clutch, and this bearing cage that fit around it, so the clutch basket rode on this bearing. However, the one that I got off eBay had a different arrangement. It had this slightly larger center boss, had no outer bearing, but instead had an inner brass bearing that this sleeve rides on. Very interesting. So it seems, having looked online, the earlier ones used this brass bearing and sleeve arrangement, whereas the later ones, 75 and on, used the smaller inner spacer with the bearing cage. So I'm going to go with the bearing, assuming that there was probably a reason why they updated it. So, I mean, again, if I decide later on that I want to go with that, it's not all that big a deal to change it, but it makes more sense to me at this point to go with the later updated version as opposed to the older one that preceded it. So, I've also double checked both assemblies fit equally well in this clutch basket. As far as I can tell online, the clutch basket itself didn't change over the years, just this bearing arrangement. So we'll put the clutch basket back in and carry on. Clutch basket goes back in. Bearing, roller bearing in this case, and the spacer. Second washer, chamfer side out. Next goes in the center. I'm choosing to use the one that came with my eBay clutch. You can see there's not much wear on it, whereas the one that came out of the bike, you can see has this groove along the outside where something snapped and dragged and dinged it all the way around. It also has a clutch bolt snapped off in it. It was snapped off when I opened up the bike, and they decided just to run it without that particular bolt installed. Yet further evidence of the lovely care and craftsmanship that went into whoever put this bike back together the last time. Just sad and pathetic. So we're going to give this a quick rinse as well in the parts washer, get the dirt off of it, and then we'll put it back in. Alright, back from the parts washer. All nice and clean. In goes the center. Next up is the lock ring and lock nut that hold the clutch to the transmission shaft. Now, some say you should replace this locking washer every time. I really don't understand why. I mean, if it was really beat up, maybe. I mean, mine's not pretty by any stretch. But this side's clearly never been bent down before, nor is this side. I'm just going to bend down a new section of it. I see no reason why it can't still perform its function at all. So it will go on, as well as our nut. So this guy gets 35 to 39 foot-pounds. So we'll go for 37. Naturally. So probably just going to pop the transmission into gear here. Into A gear, if I can find A gear. Come on. That is A gear. Not sure if that's going to give me enough resistance or not. I might need to put a wrench on the output sprocket there. Yeah. I'm just going to stick a crescent wrench on the output sprocket. We got a wrench on it. Could be a little awkward. I'll bring you back when I get this together. So I could find no good way to brace the output shaft that would let me tighten this down to the specified torque. So what I ended up doing was just giving it a couple quick wraps with the impact. It's tight enough. It's got a lock ring on it. There's no reason why it'll ever loosen off, so we're just gonna fold those over and then we're good to go. So now, I was gonna use a punch, a screwdriver to do this, but someone recommended me that I use a pair of slip jaw pliers to fold this wash over, so I'm gonna try that. And that is an excellent tip. I am definitely gonna do this from now on. That is just beautiful. Nice and easy and quick. Yep, that's not going anywhere. Okay. Yeehaw. And the new basket doesn't rub at all the entire way around, just like it should. Okay. Moving right along. So now we're just going to give this a quick blow. Just to get any metal shavings or anything in there that might have gotten in from tightening this nut and everything else. So as you can see, I've got two sets of clutch discs and steels here. What I'm going to do is go through and measure the thickness of all the clutch discs, and I'm going to make up a set of all the thickest ones. The set of steels that came with my new eBay clutch basket seem to be in much better shape than the ones that came with the bike, unsurprisingly. So we're going to use those. So I'm just going to measure those up, and then we'll go into installing them. So I measured them all. They're all virtually identical. So I just decided to use the cleaner ones from the eBay clutch. See how that goes. So, corks go in first. Off to the races we go. Should be 8 corks, 7 steels. Now goes the outer plate. In theory, if it actually fits, but you would think that it would. Interesting. There we go. Alright, let's bolt her back together. These are always a bit of a pain in the ass. there's no torque specified for these bolts. That's why you saw me going around. I saw online that it's perfectly adequate just to go on it and give the ratchet a good wrap. That's tight enough. Next up, we'll put in the Kickstarter spring. First on goes the spring seat. And the spring. Now I need a pair of pliers. Kind of a pain in the ass, these. There we go. And then there's a aluminum boss that goes in there. Hold it all in place. One kickstart spring. Starting to look more and more like an engine. And with that in, next up is our cover. But of course, first, new gasket. Get this cloth I have the engine sitting on just out of the way. Doesn't get pinched in there. And then, looks about right. I'm choosing to put this gasket on dry simply because if there's anything with the clutch discs or springs that I need to fiddle with after I get this back together and running, I want to be able to take this off without having to scrape all kinds of gasket material off. It shouldn't leak anyways with a new gasket. And we also have here a set of new stainless Allen head bolts that I bought for it. So let's consult the old guide here, and it says clutch cover should be bag H. AJFH. If yours still has the original Phillips that aren't really Phillips screws, they are actually the Japanese Phillips, which I believe is called JIS. Either way, that's why Phillips screwdrivers can just strip out in them all the time, because they're not actually Phillips screws, which is the issue. I mean, if you have a set of JIS drivers, then you're good to go, that's no problem. But most people don't. By the time you get it, odds are pretty good that they've mostly been stripped or rounded by previous idiots. As we've noted with every single piece of this bike, screwed up by a previous idiot. So I recommend just buying a whole new set of bolts. Definitely don't put Phillips back in, that's just asking for pain. But hey, if you're a sadist, go for it. So I've also got new kickstart seal So I'm just going to tap that into my cover here first before I put it on the bike. Just grab a socket to drive that down with. That should be good. We'll get a little bit of grease in there and we'll slide it on. So, I'll just put a little bit of grease inside the lips of this seal. Just going to put a little bit on the shaft. Should be good. And we slide her on. Might need a little bit of a top. Just pop it that last little bit. It isn't quite there. There it is. Just need a little bit of persuasion. Oh, I see. It's just hasn't popped over the dowel pins yet. There we go. And it's in place, just like that. It's always nice when they finally start coming back together. So satisfying. You know, you look at it, stare at it for so long in pieces. It starts to become depressing. You start wondering if it's ever going to go back together. And it finally starts to. Grab myself a Allen head socket and we'll run all those down. And the last one. There we go. Clutch cover back on.